Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today we have Oliver from Curative Mushrooms. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, excited, man. I had a lovely call with you a month or two ago now, and really excited about what you're up to and wanted to bring you on. So, I guess high level, before we dig into you and your backstory, what is Curative Mushrooms up to?
High level, huh? Um, let's see. Curative mushrooms, high level is, I would say we're primarily right at this point in time. I think we're a simple grow kit solution company for people who are interested in, trying to get their first growth of certain mushrooms that you can't normally get. That's how we started out, and that's still our primary thing that people come to us for. But we're starting to span out into a lot of other areas. But that's still our number one, I think, thing that we do at a high level.
Cool, cool. That's good. I used to have to spend months researching before I really knew how I wanted to execute. I started way back with Mycotopia, Shroomery, DMT Nexus, like jumping around all of those and trying to get my act together. It worked out great. I learned a ton, but I can see why most people wouldn't follow through with that. And it was more rare to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And from what
Yeah.
I've seen lately too, and we'll get into this later, is just how much the genetics have kind of helped. The improvements in genetics over the last 15 years have really helped make this a kind of a simpler process too. But before we jump in into that, let's talk about you. Where do you come from, and how did mushrooms start showing up on your radar, or something you were really curious about?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question. So for me, um, mushrooms, it kind of came in a different way for me. It's almost like mushrooms kind of found me instead of me looking for them. It's like typically I think the opposite of what happens to other people. But I'm retired Navy. I did 20 years in the Navy, and I was on my last tour, and I was stationed in Bahrain. I was doing a tour alone without my family. And I was sitting there, and at the time I'd blog. I was a blogger. I blogged on stuff. So that blogging is like writing articles, content online. And I did it in weight loss and stuff like that. But my buddy had hit me up and he said, "Hey, you might be interested in looking into mushrooms. I just think it's something you're interested in," because I was always into health stuff and improving, different areas of my life. And so he's like, check it out. And so and that was kind of my introduction into mushrooms. And as soon as I started reading about them, it was like an instant love connection because I just got intrigued. I was blown away by the health benefits. I was unbelievable. It was almost to the point you want to get onto a mountaintop and scream about what you just found out. It's just the most amazing. I mean, because what I mean is someone who can achieve. I was reading the studies and stuff, and someone who can achieve these life changing benefits from just a mushroom, in just a single dose. And so
Yeah.
that was kind of my introduction and how I just really started digging into them and wanting to learn more. And that was my intro, I guess, at that point.
Mm-hmm. That's dope. So, was it a particular influence or something, like a Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, or somebody like this you were picking up on this from, or did you just start seeing it out there, a lot of people talking about it?
So back when I got into it, it wasn't really popular. I didn't even know mushrooms were a thing that people really talked about. I mean, I'd had button mushrooms in the store, but my dad, we had gone hunting for mushrooms before because on the golf course where my dad lives, we found this big chicken of the woods mushroom, and we took it home, sauteed it, and it was delicious. So that was about my level of understanding when it came to mushrooms. And so it was foreign to me, but my buddy, when he was also a blogger. And so he knew about different areas. He was always researching new areas of interest, and he just came across that one for some reason, and it was perfect for me when I got into it.
That's great. Yeah, it's like not only like the culinary and like the biological health aspect, like the anti-cancer stuff from certain mushrooms and anti-inflammatory for others, neuroregenerative for even non-psychedelic mushrooms. Fascinating. And Whole
Yeah,
Foods,
it's
buying
insane.
mushrooms at Whole Foods can be a tremendously expensive hobby. Um, and even from some like really great local growers, it becomes really expensive. Like, say you wanted cordyceps, reishi, and lion's mane at home, like that's a lot to like be cultivating that in a box and like yeah. And it sounds like you've made some really cool access uh, programs available. So like, what was the next thing? So how did you say, okay, I think I want to start doing a business here?
Yeah, yeah. So at that point, so I started blogging at this point. So now I'm about 6, 7, 8 months in to just writing articles. I've written like almost 50 articles now, and I'm just, I'm really into this. I've read so much information. It's really good. But at the same time, I was building a subscriber list because people were subscribing to we were giving free stuff away. And so people were on our list and they were emailing us. And I remember this one email I got from this guy, and this is what kind of set the path for me that I got on now. He hit me up, and I don't know why I really read this one email from this guy, but it was just something about it. And he was telling me how mushrooms had saved his life, literally. Like he had died. He tried suicide on 3 attempts, and on the third attempt, he was actually successful. And it was things like mushrooms that changed his life. And so he sent me a video, and he explained all this and in great detail. And you know, and he was asking me because I had written articles on growing mushrooms at the time, not from experience, but just general information. And he's like, "Hey, man, I need what's the simplest possible way to grow mushrooms from spores from I for stuff I can't get at the grocery store or whatever. Like, what is the simplest possible, because he didn't want to become a professional mushroom grower, and he had googled it. He said he went to Reddit forums and stuff like this, and like they were telling him to buy $1,000 laminar flow hoods, and he needed all this specialized equipment. And he's like, man, there's got to be an easier way. And he said, is there any way you can help me out? And that was kind of what set me on my path now, because for some reason his story just really touched me. Um, and I could, because he was really like, it was a really amazing story. What he was actually dead. And what had happened was he planned it out well, because this was his third attempt. He planned it out well. He overdosed on drugs. He locked all the doors in his house, and that was it. He on the ground, and he was clinically dead. And somehow a neighbor or a friend, I can't remember, came around, and the side door was unlocked somehow. And he said he knew that door was locked, but somehow it was unlocked. His neighbors seen him on the floor, rushed him to the hospital, and they revived him at that point in
Wow.
time. And the reason he was so depressed, because he had suffered the loss of a loved one, which a lot of people eventually have to experience, and he was having a hard time with that. And
Yeah.
but anyway, after that, it was the things like the mushrooms and stuff like that that completely changed his life. And so he wanted to continue the thing. And so that was kind of the what put me on a path to that we're on today, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's dope. I really appreciate that story. Um, and was there any additional healing after, like psychological, and did his life seem to get better?
Well, for I honestly haven't heard from the guy since. I never did follow up with him. That's a great question. I should actually, because I'd like to bring him on actually, and because he is one of the people. That's a good idea. But no, I don't know what his. That's a great question. I don't know what his story is right now. Um, but hopefully he got his mushrooms, and because if not, I'll send him a free kit. But if he's watching.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So like, um, there's so many of these life-saving stories, right? Like, it, and it's tragic that so many people are committing suicide. Like, it's just not okay. And if psychedelics could play a part, which it seems like they could for a lot of folks, then we should go there. It's not as easy as like at home dosing is going to be perfect for everybody, right? It's like there's a lot going on there. So, for instance, in some cases, psychedelics could give somebody the energy to execute on their plan further, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know. It's hard to say like fully how that would play out. But yeah, it's a really hopeful thing that could really do well for us, like overall.
And
As
you
a
bring up a great
species.
point because, like, while we help people get the ability to grow kids, like, there is a need. Like, we try to stress, like, when you do these things, like, it's better to be around somebody that has experience, like you're saying, so that you can do things the right way is important, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, it's ugly when we don't do it right. Um, and yeah, there's just so much room for extra benefit and risk management when we do it that way, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's something like maybe we should talk about that, and maybe there's ways we can get some of your clients like better maybe, education maybe. And that could be really fun. So,
Yeah, yeah, totally. I did say I know the Vital. You guys had the Vital program recently. That's actually still open, I think. But I know we did have a pretty good response to that program from when I sent out an email to it. So
so I guess before we go too much deeper into other things, like what else is going on over there? A you've got a YouTube channel that seems to be really exploding. Like your followers are pretty wild. I'm impressed. And what else is
thanks.
going? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, yeah. So originally, when I was blogging and we were writing articles, we would try to write a video to go along with the article because I love video, and I wanted to have like a little short, kind of like short video that summed up the key points of the article, and if they wanted to know more, they could read the rest of the article, right? But so that's how it kind of started, and so we were doing that for a while, and since then we've brought on other people that are really good at video, way better than me, and so they're getting like we're starting to get into like the reels and the shorts, and those are really fun. I mean, I have a lot of fun watching those, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people do too. And so we're trying to like answer a lot of growing questions in a fun, simple way, and try to just give bite-sized pieces, right? Of really helpful information when it comes to mushrooms and psychedelics and various things. So there's multiple things going on there. We're trying to make it funner, and I just honestly I like video. It's just fun for me. I think I always
Yeah.
wanted to be an actor or something, and
Mm,
and it's just fun to do that stuff.
that's great. Um, cool. So, any other media things going on or community things with your people?
Let's see. So, um, we have Instagram. So if they're on YouTube though, it's similar stuff that we do on, but Instagram is solely like short content. And Facebook. Facebook we do have we do bi bi monthly Q&A sessions live on Facebook for anybody. Anybody can join. It's just anyone interested in growing mushrooms at home, they can hop on and we just do a live Q&A session there. And so that's available to anybody. Um, and then we do have more advanced programs for people who want to take things to the next level with growing and stuff like that that they can, if they're interested, they can get into.
I like that.
Um, we did dabble in retreats for a while. At that is a lot of work. I take my hat off to anybody doing retreats because my goodness, that is incredible. That's on pause for now, but that is we did do two retreats in Costa Rica, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I it was meeting the people. The people were amazing. But for right now, we're not doing those. Maybe in the near future, some in the future, we'll might get back into that.
Yeah, cool. It's a lot. Like I find the economics of it like impossible. Generally speaking, it's not maybe not impossible, but really hard. So,
Oh man.
I applaud anybody that does it. Um,
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah, totally.
yeah. Cool. So, let's kind of can we talk a little bit about your like one of your psychedelic experiences, maybe
Yeah, yeah, sure.
like something that
So
maybe was convincing to like go forward.
yeah, absolutely. So if we go back, so I had started blogging, right? And it's almost like I told you instantly. I had this. I just knew I was supposed to be doing something with mushrooms, and when I started reading them, and it was funny because I didn't jump into psychedelic, magic mushrooms or anything like that originally. I started out with morels, chicken of the woods, and all the turkey tail reishi, lion's mane. And then somehow later is when I got introduced to the magic ones. And when I read the clinical studies on that, it just blew me away. And I just told myself then, I was like, at some point when I retire from the Navy, because I couldn't do it in the Navy, but as soon as I retire, I want to go do a hero's journey. And it's funny because I've never done drugs in my whole life. Like I joined the Navy at 18, and when I went through high school, I never did drugs. I just didn't. It was just something I didn't get into it. And so here I am at 38, and for the first time before I do any drugs, I'm just going to go do a hero's journey, right? With no prior experience. I don't recommend this. Like, if you don't, I didn't really know what I was doing that much, but I just knew I had read the studies, and I just knew it was something I wanted to do. And so the company has started growing more and more by the time I retired. So we already had a pretty good following. So I sent an email out to my list and I was like, hey, I want to do mushrooms in Costa Rica. And so we're going to put on a retreat. So someone's going to be there with me that has experience. And so that's when we actually, the first retreat we put on, I was a member of it. Like I did it with the people there while we had a trained person, oversee and monitor and make sure everyone was safe. And and so I almost backed out. It was the night before. It was a beautiful place in Costa Rica, just the jungle. We're in the middle of the jungle. It was beautiful. And it was the night before, and I told the guy that I was there with that was monitoring, I said, look, man, I don't know if this is something I want to do right now,
Mm-hmm.
And he's
Yep.
like, oh, really? He's like, let's go have a beer. And so we went to the near little shop down the corner and we had a beer, and he's like, so what's going on? And so I told him what I was feeling. And I was like, man, this is scary, man. Like, what if this changes who I am? What if I'm not the same person? Like I'm comfortable with who I am right now. This is starting to frighten me because I'm getting so close, And I didn't realize how scary it was until you're almost there and you're about to do it, right? And for some reason, he's like, don't worry, man. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And then for some reason, though, the next day I was like, I'm going to do it. So we went and did it. We hiked 30 minutes into the middle of the Costa Rican jungle where there was two humongous waterfalls that must have been like 50 feet high. And at the bottom was this beautiful, it looked like the Garden of Eden or something. It was just breathtaking.
Awesome.
And so we find our little spots down there under the waterfall and in the mud. And it's not too muddy, but muddy and stuff. And so my buddy comes by and he says, all right, I'm about to give you 7 grams of mushrooms. And basically, are you ready? And so, yeah. And so he told me a little more like, how, do I trust him and I'm going to keep him safe and everything. And then I just did it. A huge handful, man. It was horrible tasting. I almost gagged. And then we had some Hershey chocolate, luckily, because man, I don't know if I could have stomached it. So I started smashing the Hershey chocolate and I'm squishing all this stuff. And I'm like, man, this is really hard. Finally, took me like 5 minutes to eat 7 grams of dry mushroom. And so there it was. And so then now I'm sitting there. And, it takes a while for it to kick in, right? I'm kind of sitting there. I'm like, okay, well, this is happening now. There's no backing out now. And so nothing is going on yet. So I'm just like, this ain't nothing. This ain't a big deal. And then, of course, all of a sudden, And we're in this private location in the jungle, and all of a sudden tourists start coming. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, no, please no. So now we've got tourists walking right in front of me in the creek to go to the waterfall. And at the same time, it's starting to kick in now. And I'm like, oh, whoa. And things, now it's just really heavy. And the other lady, she's already under the waterfall, like dancing like this. And I'm looking over at her, and then everything freezes. And my buddy's frozen like this, and she's frozen like this under the waterfall. And she's still moving like slowly. And that was the start. And from then I just went deep, and it just kept going. And it was, I don't know how long I guess it lasted 4 to 6 hours. But it was starting to get dark. And so now I'm enjoying the mud. I'm on the ground, and my buddy comes over me. He says, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, I'm good. And then he says, "Well, we got to go." And I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't want to go. I want to." And so it wasn't. Anyway, I had to walk out of the jungle, and I'm still heavy on a trip. And now I'm walking, and this is not an easy walk. You got to walk through 5 creeks, 5 massive, like up to your waist, rocks everywhere. I had to walk out of this jungle with 2 other people that were on mushrooms. So, anyway, that was,
that's wild. Everything worked out okay. Nobody got hurt. Yeah. No, no injuries. Everybody came out okay.
So it's funny you say that, because toward the end, as I'm walking out, it was funny because, when I went into this, I was heavily a Christian, because my dad was a pastor, and I grew up in a Christian family. And so it was interesting, because when I was going through this experience, a lot of it was playing on my what I understand about Christianity and stuff. And so as I got to the creek, so I thought I was Jesus Christ at the time, right? This is what I was like, okay, I'm Jesus Christ, I'm God, and I can walk on this water, right?
Oh yeah.
So here we go. And so as far as I knew, I walked on the water. And my buddies afterwards, because I didn't know what was going on, my buddy's like, how did he just walk across? Well, I'm barefoot, by the way, because I left my shoes somewhere in the jungle. So I'm walking, and there's huge boulders and rocks everywhere under the water. Like, you can't walk fast. Somehow I flew across the water barefoot, and everyone just thought, oh, his feet are broken. Like, there's no way. When we get back, he's going to have broken feet. I don't know how I did it, but when I got back, none of my feet weren't bruised. And, yeah, I don't know, but that was the closest we got, I guess, to getting hurt.
Oh, wild. Yeah, I'm glad you're good. Well, that's great. So, and I'm glad you kind of waited till you're out of the Navy. I know it's probably hard for a lot of folks who are enlisted and full time, and like they want healing, but they're not really sure what the right path is. I've actually been hearing about more and more people who are enlisted using to get well so they can, finish up their career strong. But it's
it's funny you say that, because at our second retreat we did in Costa Rica, one of the people was an E6 in the Navy that was attending, and he took leave to be there.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't it fascinating? It's like really wild to me.
Yeah, it is.
But I think I think the military establishment is going to have to kind of catch up a little bit here. Like, how people aren't getting help in the way they want help.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny you say that, because that was one of my things in the Navy. I grew up in a family that, my parents were divorced. My mom lived in another state than my dad, but I'd visit her during like summer breaks. But that whole family suffered from depression. She had her kids on depression. She was taking depression medicine. And so I grew up with that side of my family always doing that. And so I was very aware of what people did for depression and how they handled it. And then, but in the Navy too, like I seen in there how they were handling it. And because I remember one thing in particular because I led like the fitness enhancement. I was like a personal trainer in the Navy, kind of. And during that program, we actually had people that were overweight and getting kicked out of the Navy. Literally, they were on their third failure. They were getting kicked out of the Navy for failing the physical fitness test.
Wow.
And turned out, and they failed. They were getting kicked out. And it turned out the med board reviewed the case and they found out that the antidepressants that she had been prescribed caused this massive weight gain. And so once that was uncovered, they took her off of it and all the weight went away. And here she was about to get kicked out. She thought she had a weight problems. And as soon as she stopped the antidepressants, man, this girl, she thinned right up. And she was nowhere even near to being kicked out. So, yeah.
That's incredible, right? Like there is kind of a lack of willingness to look at these side effects straight in the face and go, oh, perhaps there's something going on here. Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, I wonder. It makes me wonder too, like what kind of fitness gains could we get if we implemented this stuff well? And I think some substantial ones and health benefits to boot, right?
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
you know, who wants to be ill when they get out? You're like, in a way, it's
Exactly.
like your life starting over when you get out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing. When people get out, especially someone like me who did 20 years, like my whole life, that's all I know is the Navy. And then you get out and everything's different now. You can't identify the same way as you used to. And so that can be that can be hard, I think that can cause depression right there.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Um, so I guess let's get into a little bit about growing. So like what does a grow kit look like first? First and foremost. Let's start there.
yeah, yeah, sure. So it's funny because so after I got that person I told you about that wanted me to create the grow kit. So I had no idea, right? I had no experience at growing. But I wanted to help him out, right? So I was like, well, let me do some research. So I went on this research, kind of like you were saying. Like I was reading Paul Stamets, I was going to the Shroomery, I was going to Reddit. I must have read every book, every website. Like I spent 2 weeks and I just read. And I paid money for all the courses that were available. I think Grow Cycle had a professional course on growing. I watched everything. I took notes everywhere. I tried to, and I just like became this analyst and I just researched everything about growing that I could. Now, Paul Stamets' book was very hard for me to understand, but his stuff is amazing, right? Everything is based on his stuff, but it wasn't the easiest to read for someone brand new.
Right.
But great stuff. So I read as much as I could. And then after I read as much as I could, I looked at what was currently offered on the market. And so the analysis came down to was we wanted to offer 3 grow bags instead of 1 or 2. I figured because I got this idea from Ancient Path Naturals, which was a grow bag company, and I bought theirs, and it came with 3 bags. And I thought that's a great idea because you can spread out your risk. Because one of the things I learned about mushrooms was it's not 100% guarantee every time you try to grow a bag, it's going to work. So I was like, well,
Right.
let's spread the risk out over 3 bags. That way, even if one of them works, 1 bag produces enough mushrooms to supply you for a year of mushrooms. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So that's why we went with 3 grow bags, and it comes with 2 syringes. And the reason we did 2 syringes is because one thing we learned early on with syringes was they're inherently at risk of contamination because it's almost impossible to collect a perfectly clean spore print. And so we figured, well, we'll do 2. So you can inject
Yeah.
1 spore syringe in that bag, 1 spore syringe in that bag. Now you've got 3 bags, 2 syringes, and it was just to spread out the risk to help people get better success. Because look, like you said, like it's complicated, but we're like, let's just understand it's complicated and spread out the risk a little bit. So now you don't have to be a professional mycologist. You don't have to get every bag right. You only need 1 bag to work, right? And so that was how we made it easy for people to not have to become a mycologist and buy all this expensive equipment. by doing it that way. So that was kind of.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. And so people are aware, like, let's start at the top, like possession federally of psilocybe cubensis and other psilocybin containing mushrooms is not, it's not really allowed, right? But how does this grow kit model work? Like, how are you able to operate as your business, and maybe further, how can people stay safe out there?
Oh yeah, great question. Yeah, that's like the number one question that we really get. So the law, the way it's written, is psilocybin is a federally banned substance by the federal government, right? And but that is just for psilocybin. That's the compound that's produced when you grow mushrooms. That's the only thing that's banned. Spores are not banned. Spores are 100% legal. And there, I guess there's 3 states that I've heard about that say they don't allow it, but we've looked into their local laws, and maybe you know more about it, but we could never find anything that was clear stating like, hey, spores are illegal. But even if that's the case, even if there was 3 states that couldn't get it, that's still the majority of the United States that can legally, at a state level and a federal level, get spores shipped to their door right now, legally. And the only issue we came into was, well, you can't ship those with a grow bag. Because if you ship certain types of spores with a grow bag together, now you got a problem. Because now that's considered conspiracy. Even though, because you know, now you're implying your intention is to grow if you ship them together, which people could get in trouble with. So to mitigate that, what we did is we created a microscopic book, spores microscopic study book. And it's a really good book that shows people how to study spores under a microscope, because that is a real thing. People do it. And any foraging guide you ever look in, they've got the spore analysis of that mushroom, because that's how you identify mushrooms, with spores. So we created the book, and what we allow to happen there is people can buy that book, and the vendor that we work with, that's not our company, but it's one of the best companies in the country for genetics and clean spore syringes. They made it. They said, "Hey, we'll give anyone who buys your book 2 free syringes to
Yeah,
study under a microscope to help them out to learn how to study spores." So they're able to ship those types of spores that are for microscopic use only, like a magic mushroom spore syringe. You can study that under a microscope. So that
right.
ships separately from that company for the purpose of studying under a microscope, if they got like the kit, right? And then the bags, when we ship bags, those are for gourmet mushrooms, for growing mushrooms. Now, if you happen to inject the microscopic use only syringe into that grow bag, then you would produce illegal mushrooms, very potent, very large illegal mushrooms. And we would never endorse or encourage anyone to break federal law and to do that, right? But if they did, it would definitely would work. So that's kind of how that was structured. And does that make sense? I know sometimes
Yeah,
it's hard.
totally. And let's add a little color too. So there are certain states where state law prohibits possession of and transfer of these spores. I think California is one of them. Like, you know, there are certain states where you can't really operate as cleanly. Colorado seems to be fine. I know there's a lot of activity in Florida, but folks should check their own state law to be sure.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
think Georgia, Idaho, and California were the 3 states that um, we've been told. Now, I've asked everyone in the micro community about these laws, and no one's ever seen these laws. Like, it's like almost like a rumor, but it's got to be real, because merchant accounts, sometimes if you try to sell spores, they want to know that those 3 states that you don't ship to them. But we don't deal with shipping spores because we don't sell spores. We sell the grow bags. But um, yeah, I've never seen it. But yeah, like you said, I would recommend anyone look at their local state laws before buying them to be safe.
right? Yeah, and then I guess let's talk about discreetness, right? Like, this isn't like a cannabis grow where you have to have a huge tent, right? And like a lot of electricity. Like, these bags are relatively small, and
Mm.
you know, as long as your closet is the right temperature range, roughly speaking, like, you should be pretty good, right? Or how do you like to think about that part?
Yeah. So that's a great question too. So the bags create their own microclimate. Like cannabis, like you said, if you're going to grow that, you typically need a bigger tent because those plants grow really large. Well, mushrooms, you can keep them in a little container like this, and they'll, because mushrooms, only grow a certain height. So everything can be done right in that bag. And the cool thing is, it creates its own like humidity dome. So, and you can grow it right there. You just, when it's time to fruit, you just cut the top off the bag, and then and that's pretty much it. And it'll just create its own microclimate. And so really everything's done in the bag from the start to the finish. And they never need any extra equipment. All they got to do is just inject it, um, and just wait for a few weeks until it's ready to fruit. Is pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Um, and can you do multiple flushes with a bag? So, like, for people who don't know, a flush is when the mushrooms really start fruiting and become what you would actually want to harvest. And sometimes the substance actually can do multiple flushes, like 2, 3 to 5 I've seen. But I know there's some complicated factors, but how do you like to talk about flushes?
Yeah. So flushes, in our bags, we typically see at least three flushes. Some people get more, up to five, but we'll typically see three flushes with the bag. Um, and on average, we notice for each flush, you'll get about somewhere between 50 and 80, um, excuse me, about 26 dry grams on average on a flush. Depending on the genetics, if you get, we do promos every month for different types of genetics that our vendors are offering, and so if you get really good genetics, obviously that number can change, but we see around 20 to 25 dry grams on one flush.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty big. I think that's probably plenty for most people for quite a while per bag,
Oh
right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
imagine you get three flushes like this. So now you're up to like 60, 70 dry grams off of one bag. And because we've improved the bags so much and our vendors have improved their processes so much, like we're starting to see everyone get almost 100% success rate. In the beginning, we'd be happy if someone got one bag, but now we're starting to see everyone get three bags working because we just keep dialing this in more and more.
Right.
And so now imagine you've got three bags that are going to produce three flushes. And I mean, geez, that can be almost how many dry grams? That's more than you'll ever need, probably.
Yeah, right. And then I guess I'm kind of curious on like what have you been hearing from um let's say others who maybe have retired from the military? Like what are folks thinking from a maybe veteran perspective? Or if you know people who are enlisted who have like interesting thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good question too, because a lot of my friends are retired Navy right now, or had just gotten out. And because in the area I'm at, this is a heavy military area in Virginia. And so a lot of them come by here, and actually, once they found out I was into mushrooms, because I wasn't like that in the Navy, but now they come by, and yeah, they they seem to have great benefit from it for them. And and they had the same skepticism as me. They were kind of worried about it because anyone who did 20 years in the military is a good boy, right? They haven't done drugs for the most point. And so for them to come out of 20 years of that and then to do mushrooms, that can be scary, in a way. So, but they find great benefit for what they're telling me about it as well.
Well, that's really good. Um and like are they do they become advocates at a certain point?
Yeah, I think that's very common. Like a lot of people in our, just in general, that come into our company and get from us. I think you develop like a love for the mushroom. Not only for what it does to you, but once you start growing them too, like it's like almost like you feel like you're giving birth or something. Like it's a child because you've nurtured it for like a month or maybe 45 days, And when it finally starts to fruit, like sometimes I got a nice little grow room. I grow, and there you go. Like here I went from somebody who never grew, and I've got my own grow room now because it's just fun. Like you go in there and you'll just sit in there and stare at your mushrooms growing, and you can stare at them like they're so enjoyable to look at. And then the benefits from them. I mean, when you take them, but the funny thing is a lot of us grow more than we can use. And it's just because we love growing the different genetics. It's just fun. And so it started out, so in most people, it starts out as they want the medicine, right? But then you get hooked because it's so fun to grow them. And when it's this easy, you just get a bag and inject it. It's so easy now. A lot of people find themselves buying more and more, even if they don't need them. Because they already got enough. Like me, I've got too many boxes now of mushrooms. Like, what am I doing with all these mushrooms? I start giving them away to people that I think could use them. I use them as gifts and stuff like that. So
That's cool, especially if they get colonized. It's like kind of, just a couple week process. Like that's pretty great. So yeah, I used to actually have to like sterilize all my own bags, like get the grains and whatever else ready. And yeah, it's such a project to like do that at a personal scale. And not to like the expense of the equipment was crazy. So I'm just like happy to know that people are going to have an easier time these days.
Yeah, and it's not easy. I'll just tell you this. It wasn't easy to get around all the legal part of this, to make this legal for people to be able to do it. And one of the keys, I think, to making it work was we got rid of the word magic mushroom. Like there's no reason to use that word. And we try to train people that come to us to not use that word. That just gets people in trouble. So just use the word happy mushroom. Now, happy mushroom could mean anything. Lion's mane or reishi is a mood boosting mushroom. It's got nicknames like Nature's Xanax, Liquid Yoga, because it improves the mood. That's a happy mushroom too, right? So, but typically we know what people mean when they want happy mushrooms. And so we tried to get people to use the word happy mushrooms. And that's a big part in helping us keep things legal for everybody. Because the biggest thing we don't want to know is that you're breaking the law. Like, don't contact me and say, hey, I'm growing this strain of mushroom. I need help. I can't work with you anymore. You're telling me you're breaking the law. Now I can't. So tell me you're growing happy mushrooms and we're good, right? Like that's part of keeping this thing safe for everybody. So it takes a lot of work. Like you said, it's kind of a pain in the butt. I wish it was easier to talk about, but that's how we're able to do it right now.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. And let's dig in a little bit. Like, what other things can growers do to stay safe legally beyond that?
How can growers stay safe legally? That's a good question. Here's my take on it. Most people who are growing mushrooms, they're as long as you're using them for personal use, like you're never really going to get in trouble. The only time someone's going to get in trouble legally with doing mushrooms is if you go out in public and do something, bad, to draw attention to yourself to get that type of a thing. But if you're just using these things in the comfort of your own home, or like me in nature, I use them when I go out in nature. Like I microdose. I don't know if you microdose, but I microdose like daily pretty much. And sometimes if I'm walking in nature, I'll take a little bit heavier of a microdose just so I can be in touch with nature more. But, like if you take a major dose, one of the guys that one of our customers, I'm not going to say any names, right? But one of our customers messaged me and he's like, hey man, I just got arrested. And I was like, okay, like what happened? And he's like, man, I was walking around downtown Dallas, Texas, butt naked for 3 hours. And then finally a cop arrested me and took me, and he said, you know what he did? He just took me home. He didn't even arrest me. The cop took him
That's
home.
not what I would expect in Texas. That's amazing.
I know, right?
Wow.
But yeah, so if you're doing a heavy dose, I would encourage you at that point to look at your setting, have someone monitor what you're doing that knows how to do that, knows what to expect. And very important, someone that you trust with your life. because you're going to need to trust them in the moment when you start getting into it. But that's very important. I would definitely recommend that. Like, because that'd be the only thing that would get someone in trouble is like this guy. He got arrested because he did so much that he lost his ability to, be like normal people. So,
So, so let's see. So, like, what are some interesting things you're seeing inside your community, or like the larger community around Virginia, this psychedelic specific, like anything of note that's like got you interested or a little concerned, or positive or negative or medium?
can you say the first part of that question again?
Yeah, just like what's going on in your world in Virginia and or with your client base community, that somebody like myself all the way out in Colorado might not be aware of that's happening in Virginia.
Oh, like when it comes specifically to like mushrooms and stuff?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Or
okay.
psychedelic culture or whatever else.
What's that?
Or psychedelic culture or whatever else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I did see something recently. I don't follow the news a lot, but a lot of my friends do, and they'll send me like links to stuff when something important happens. But I did see something recently with Virginia specifically, where there was something that was going to pass the desk of whoever up in politics that was going to they were looking into the legality of mushrooms. And so it seemed like they were actually looking into legalizing them in some way. But that was the last I heard of that. I think that was like 6-7 months ago. I haven't heard anything since then on it. But that was the last I heard. Specifically for Virginia, at least.
Yeah, I did hear some stuff about Virginia. I think I know some of the people working on that. I think maybe Cluster Busters was involved there. So I'll, if I find out anything, I'll send it your way, Oliver, because that's, something you should definitely.
Yeah, totally. I'm definitely interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and how about like future, like what are you interested in terms of like advancement of mycology? Like this looks pretty much like the peak of like the technology, but is there something like that could be speculated about maybe a couple years out in terms of like making it even easier, as if it could be easier?
So here's the goal of mycology, in my opinion, right? So if you look at grow kits in general, like you can go on Amazon right now and buy a lion's mane grow kit from many different resources, right? And you get this box in the mail, and it's a grow kit that's already colonized in a box, and all you got to do is just cut it, right? And it'll start fruiting. A lot of companies do that, and that's the easiest way to grow mushrooms. And I imagine when mushrooms become if magic mushrooms start to become legal, that would be the preferred way to, probably for most people, I would imagine, would be to just get a block already colonized, and then they can fruit it, right? So that's probably, and even if you're injecting mushrooms, like injecting mushrooms from spores is not the way we do it in the advanced world, right? Like it's good for beginners that know nothing because it at least lets you get your mushrooms. But really the next level up is you want to create liquid culture, because liquid culture is going to be 100% clean, and it's going to be the best genetics. Because any time someone takes liquid culture, for those who don't know, is a clone of a mushroom, basically. So if I create a syringe of this liquid, it's like blended up mushroom mycelium, like chunks of mushroom, basically. And it's 100% sterile, and it's cloning another mushroom species exactly. Now with spores, every time you inject spores, you're growing a whole new strain of mushroom that never existed on the planet Earth until that moment, because two spores came together and created their own special strain at that point in time. And so you never know what you're going to get. It could be a colonizer, but a big fruiter, or it could be a super fast colonizer and it doesn't even fruit at all, because nature's just kind of unpredictable. That's just the way spores are. But if you get liquid culture in a syringe. It's, you know exactly what you're getting. This mushroom will colonize in exactly 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll get exactly this much flush. It'll look exactly this way. So liquid culture is the preferred way. And we teach people how to make that. So now, but you never have to do that. But that would be like, if you had the option to get spores or liquid culture, you would always want to get liquid culture. So in the growing world, I feel like that's as good as you can get.
I think so, right? It's like there's less room for contamination because it's colonizing faster. You don't have to wait for that germination phase, and yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I would love
And then, but
to
here's the
see
thing
more.
too. Like,
Hmm.
here's the thing too. Like, if they become legal, are people still going to want to grow them? Or at that point, you probably just get a bottle in the mail with your microdosing all ready to go. So there's a lot of unknowns on where this thing leads in the future. But I do believe there's always going to be a market for growers because it's just fun. And you can create your own strains of mushrooms if you really get into it. I mean, you can even name strains after yourself. And plus, isn't it cool to grow your own? Because now you have super fresh mushrooms. You know exactly what it is, how fresh. It's going to be the most potent because you just grew it. And I'll be honest, when you grow your own, it feels like the mushrooms were like grown specifically for you. And like, I don't know, there's something special about them. So,
I agree. Yeah, it's like it's really nice to grow. I really wish I could still. The I might start growing oysters or a reishi or something soon. So you know, I think there's going to be some economics there, right? Like certain people will want to grow, some will want to grow as a matter of like, pleasure and principle, and others will
yeah.
just buy the prepackaged product, right?
Mm.
Whatever it is.
You know what's funny though is I think about it now. In the beginning, I thought I'd rather just get the pills or the capsules because it's already ready. But now that I grow with my bags and they're so easy, like even if it was available in a capsule for those specific happy mushrooms, like I would I would probably still grow my own because they're, I don't know, I can get the best genetics because if you're with like Curative Mushrooms, we do promos every month for like the best genetics. Matter of fact, we just partnered with this college kid. He's like doing some cutting edge stuff that I've never heard of, but he figured out a way to crossbreed a psilocybin strain, psilocybe cubensis mushroom with I think it was natalensis, which is not a cubensis. It's never been done. And he somehow did it successfully. And we contacted this kid immediately because we heard about him in the myco community. And I can't remember his name right now. I'm drawing a blank. But we contacted him, and he's going to be working specifically with Curative Mushrooms to create new strains of mushrooms every month that never existed before.
Wow.
And it's only going to be for Curative Mushroom members that'll be able to get
That's
those.
super
And so that was
interesting.
a big deal. I'm super excited about this kid. He's like super smart.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. I forgot about that, but
Well, that's super interesting. I wonder what you'll come up with. Keep me posted. I'm really curious on that. And this does seem like a really interesting pathway to, novelty and like, unique offerings,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Imagine getting a mushroom that was crossbred with these two completely different species. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Like no one's ever had that mushroom,
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Um, cool. And then I'm kind of curious what kind of folks, is it people from all walks of life that are buying your stuff? Or is it like
Oh
a
yeah.
certain segment of people?
At this point, we're getting pretty broad reach. It seems like pretty much anybody that's suffering from depression is finding benefits with these kits. Right now, obviously we have a lot of military, probably because I'm retired military, so we do have a lot of veterans that like our kits. But every day we're bringing in more and more people, and it's just kind of broadening more and more because I think the cool thing about these kits is they help anybody. And that's one thing that's amazing about mushrooms, and it's something that I learned as I did it and as I read about it. But you don't have to be depressed to take mushrooms. Like mushrooms will help anybody improve like so much about your life, and it's so individual to each person. Like I didn't
Right.
take mushrooms because I was specifically doing it to overcome depression or anything like that. I took it, the reason I took mushrooms was, what drew me into it was, it was like answering questions about the world that I've always wanted to know. I've always had a problem with everything I've been told. And this was like my opportunity to finally get some type of an answer for things that I didn't understand. And that was my reason. And it changed my life completely. Completely changed my life. And it was honestly the most significant experience in my life, other than my kids, seeing them be born. And like, it's that huge in my life. So I think it can help anybody. Anybody in any situation, I believe they would help, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say like next to, it's a really, really broad segment of people could get a really positive response. Like there's a couple folks I might not want to say yes to, but like largely, yeah, totally. Like I think it's something people should, be researching to see if it's a good idea.
Yeah,
Right.
no, yeah, absolutely. Because it is life changing. Absolutely. Anybody who's looking at this should totally do the research. And we have a lot of good articles. I know you got a lot of great training too. So the training's out there. And I mean, your company provides amazing training. I've seen it on your site. So I'd encourage people to learn more like I did before they do it. Because, when you go into these things, your intentions, like that's one thing, leading retreats and all these things. Like the biggest thing when we did retreats was building the right intention. Like we screen people before they come to make sure they're coming for the right reasons and that they're prepared mentally for what they're about to do and why they're doing it. And so you need to, like, anyone who's doing this, I wouldn't recommend just go do it and see what this does. Like I'd learn more about it, and then I'd have like understand why you're doing it for yourself. This would be my thing.
Cool. And then maybe last thing, like what was one like mushroom fact that kind of like blew your mind more on the mycology side? Just kind of like give the scientifically interested something to chew on.
Mushroom fact that blew my mind. Mushroom fact. Um, it would have to be the life changing. But we've talked so much about the life changing benefits from a single dose. I would say second to that, if we get off of like psychedelics for a second.
Sure.
But like one of the things that really just blew my mind was when I watched Paul Stamets talk. I think it was on Red or whatever that show is called, or TED, not
Ted.
Red.
Yeah.
He was talking on TED, and he told the story. I think it was TED, but he told the story of how his mother like had stage 4 breast cancer and was on the verge of pretty much dying. Like the doctors, I think, gave her like a few months to live. Like it was like softball size, and it was like spread everywhere, and like she wasn't long. And Paul Stamets said that he started to supplement her cancer treatment therapy with turkey tail because he was growing turkey tail and he was really into turkey tail at the time. And he did that in combination with turkey tail and the treatment she was getting from the doctors. She's still alive today, I think. And she's, at the time of the recording, he was doing it. And that's like 15, 20 years later, right? That she was completely cancer free and they gave her a few months to live. I mean, stuff like that. And that's one case. There's so many like that, but like it just blew my mind. Like these mushrooms are like almost magical. All of them, not just, we talk a lot about psilocybin, but that's incredible, So yeah, that's
I'd agree. Yeah. They're so incredible for so many reasons, so many underexplored applications, right? Thankfully, Chinese, Japanese have been kind of keeping the flame alive. I'm sure some other Asian countries as well. And yeah, I think we're picking up speed as a result of finally understanding there's some really great stuff for us here. And yeah, I can't wait to get more data but I also can't wait for more people to, start trying mushrooms and all kinds, really. And
Yeah, yeah. And that's what we do at Curative Mushrooms. We bring I feel like where we fit in to this whole because there's a lot of players in every part of this. But I feel like Curative Mushrooms kind of is positioned as this company, as the front end company for everyone else. And like we bring in these new people. We're really good at piquing the interest of somebody who might want to benefit from mushrooms and bringing them into the world and getting them introduced. And I feel like you just said, introducing people to this knowledge and this, because most people don't know. And that's kind of like, I agree, that's like the same thing. That's like our mission. It kind of is what we do too.
yeah, well, that's great. Cool. Well, we're at about an hour. I'm kind of curious if there's anything else you want to mention. Like, well, let's hear about your website. Like, where can people find your YouTube show, things like that.
Oh yeah, sure. So if you go to curativemushrooms.com, that's our main website. You'll see our blog articles. We just launched a store, so you can actually check out in a store right now. Most of our products are listed there. Then we have our YouTube channel, Curative Mushrooms YouTube channel. We're posting new videos every day, and we're working heavily now on moving more into YouTube. And because I think there's a lot of opportunity there to spread the knowledge of mushrooms more, because YouTube seems to be more friendly towards magic mushrooms, whereas Facebook and Instagram, like they just want to, as soon as you say something wrong, you're gone. Well,
Yeah, right.
YouTube, they just age restrict you, but they allow the information. So we're definitely pushing more into YouTube. We really and you're heavily in YouTube too. So yeah, we definitely like YouTube. We're on Instagram as well, Curative Mushrooms. A lot of short video content there that's entertaining and educational about mushrooms and stuff. Um, and then, yeah, for anybody who's interested in growing mushrooms for the first time, if you go to Curative Mushrooms, and we have it's called an all-in-one happy mushroom for sad people grow kit. And I recommend you take the most popular option, which is for happy mushrooms. And if that's what you're into, but we do offer lion's mane, turkey tail, shiitake, and oyster grow kits as well.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. Well, Oliver, I really appreciate you being on the show, and I hope people check out your website and your show. There's some fun stuff there. It's largely mushroom focused, right? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. The main thing we got going on right now is growing mushrooms. That's where most of our community that we've built is all about growing. We are launching coffee in the next couple months. It's going to be some really good mushroom coffee. It's an instant coffee that's coming. We got a lot of other cool things coming as well. But if anyone's interested, just follow us, and then stay up to date on that stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. Let's hang out backstage for a minute, and yeah, hope we can do it again.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great time.